Hello, everyone. I'm Marcy Gallagher with Mountain Pacific, and welcome to part two of our Journey of Recovery webinar series. So just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded, so please make sure your line is muted unless you're speaking, and feel free to use the chat to comment or ask questions. Next slide, Lynette. I wanted to begin by sharing the four major dimensions of recovery as defined by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Self-health, overcoming or managing one's disease or symptoms, and making informed, healthy choices that support physical and emotional well-being. Home, having a stable and safe place to live. Purpose, conducting meaningful daily activities such as a job or volunteering, family caretaking, or creative hobbies, and the independence, income, and resources to participate in society. And last, community, having relationships and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. And I know our speaker today, April, will be touching on all those dimensions of recovery. You want to go to the next slide, Maynette? We're just trying to gauge how familiar folks on the line are with recovery services. So if you want to pull up that polling question, Maynette, just let us know how familiar you are with the recovery services in Montana. Very familiar, somewhat familiar, or maybe not familiar at all. Okay, so we kind of have a little bit of both. We have very familiar and also somewhat familiar. Next slide, please. So the goal of this series is to have our speakers share their recovery experiences and challenges, as well as speak to the recovery services and programs that are offered at their respective organizations, and also focus on collaboration and breaking down silos. Next slide. So we are excited today to have April Seat, a certified behavioral health peer support specialist, talk to us today about her journey and the great recovery-oriented work being done at Hope Rescue Mission, where April currently serves as the outreach director. So April, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Well, I also, first of all, I just so thankful that I've got an opportunity to be where I am, and someone gave me a chance to, um, well, the executive director at the time gave me an opportunity and a chance to be a part of this team. Because at first it wasn't something that they even thought would work out. So it's definitely an honor. And um, so I was an addict for 25 years. I started um, using meth when I was 12 years old. It was brought to me by some friends of mine, and um, I decided to try that. And I just remember at that age, being able to, uh, I'm sorry, I just need to turn off my phone. I apologize for that. Um, but at 12 years old is when I first tried meth. I mean, I grew up in a home that was like an upper middle class home. My parents were not addicts at all. They didn't drink or do drugs. Was the youngest, of my twin, identical twin, and the youngest of five kids. And a lot of my parents worked a lot. My other siblings had dealt with substance abuse as well. And so as as a child, I was often left just like kind of alone, like one of the strongest kids. And so being one of the stronger kids, it was a place to where like my parents felt like I didn't need them as much. So I was kind of left in this area to kind of figure things out on my own and got involved with um, trying drugs at 12 years old. And from 12 years old, I was off and on, using drugs and just experimenting with what was given to me. By 14, I had met a man that was 10 years older than me, and I started dating him, and he had four kids that were 2, 3, 5, and 6. We ended up getting married shortly after that, which I did have permission to do that, but that marriage and I was a child. I was 14, um, going on 15, thought I had everything under control and I was grown. Um, all it was really a marriage filled with drugs, alcohol, and me just trying to figure out what life was like, raising kids, taking care of a family. Um, I stayed in that marriage for about 15 years when I had my own son. And throughout that time, it was a lot of partying and drinking, and that just was our life. But by the time I was 25, I had my son. The marriage was dissolving, and because of drugs and alcohol, you just can't, nothing is manageable. By the time my son was 10 months old, I was getting we were separating, and me and my son, um, and the other kids, actually, I was just done with the marriage. And so we got separated and ended up getting a divorce. Met a guy within like 30 days of that. He's 25 years older than me, and he took me and my kids in. And, he did love us, but, we spent a lot of time drinking and using drugs. And my kids would go with their dad on the weekends. And so we were using as often as we can. And then it got to a place to where one day I just remember waking up and I was like, I don't know if I can quit doing this. And that's where like my addiction really grabbed a hold of me. I didn't realize I was an addict at the time because I just thought, oh, I'm having fun. But there was a part of me where my body was like, I need this and I want it. And it was something that was controlling my everyday life. Um, so 5 years into this relationship, um, we end up, having some domestic abuse. He went to jail. I found a new place for me and my son, and was in that place for about a month before I remember waking up, and now it's an everyday thing. And I called my ex and asked him if he can just like take my son for like 30 days so I can get help. And instead of he agreed to that, but instead of that actually being the process, I woke up the next day and I had emergency court papers for custody of my son and another eviction notice. And I just remember at that point, that's where my addiction completely took a hold on me. And I just was in a place to where like I was done. I'm not going to continue to try anymore. And um, I lost custody of my son, lost my apartment at that time. And I remember going back to my place and there was a thought of like, if I can't have this, then it took me down a place to where I just thought that like, I don't want to go on with life anymore. And at that point, I ended up using intravenously, and that's where the addiction really took its feel and took me down a road of just destruction. Um, in 2010, um, my husband was in jail, and he actually got out. And at this point, I was full blown on into my addiction, and I thought that he didn't care or want to be still in my life. And he said, I'm moving back to Montana, and here's a bus ticket. And when you're ready, you're the last woman I want to love, and I want to just come home when you're ready. And I wasn't ready at that point. My addiction has completely took over everything. And about that time when he left, I went to Los Angeles and I was hanging out there because that's just where my addiction took me. And I ended up being in Skid Row. Little did I know that I would stay there for multiple months. And 10 months later, I just remember feeling like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. It's been a rough road of being alone, being married at a young age, and realizing that this addiction has took me to places I thought I would really never amount to anything or even have a future. Um, so at that point, I remember, calling my mom and telling her that I wanted to be done and I was done with this life. And I found a way back to Barstow, where I was originally from. Um, and it was one of the hardest days ever because I didn't really know that I can stop doing drugs or I can even like leave that lifestyle because it wasn't even a matter of like being like wanting to do the drugs. I was just trying to stay well at this point. Um, and I ended up making it back home and I had to go get the bus ticket that my husband left me. And it was at um, oh my gosh, I have a lot going on here. I apologize. Um, well, anyways, I ended up going back to the house that I was not, welcome at anymore. And I had to like find the courage to knock on the door to see if that ticket was still there so I can move, so I can get that ticket so I can move on. And I remember showing up there, knocking on the door, and um, like it was almost a miracle that they allowed me in and the ticket was still there. And so I had that ticket to Montana. And within that time, um, there was a lot of bridges that I burnt, and there was people that did no longer like me. And so it was a rough walk from that place to where my mom lived. And when I got to my mom's house, I had been in multiple, situations from one place to there. Um, so the next day was when I was supposed to get on the bus. My mom actually picked up my son that I hadn't seen in several months and took me down to the bus. And the first bus that I was supposed to get on, I missed it. And I just remember my son in the back, like crying, and he's like, "Mom, please don't miss the bus." And at that moment, it just put me in a place of like, um, really thinking about like, I don't want to leave him, but not realizing that I already had chose my addiction and over everything. And I remember being on the bus the next day. The next bus came and I did get on that bus. And the whole bus ride was super hard. And I just remember like about St. George, Utah, and I was crying and I was a mess. But there was this lady on the bus and when she went to get off the bus, she like put her hand on my shoulder and she was like, whatever it is that you're feeling, I just want to let you know that, I really feel like this is the right move for you. And she didn't know me from anything. She just seen the brokenness that I was struggling with and really trying to get through, this transition and, being sick at the same time and fighting with my own demons in the battle and the struggles of addiction to actually like commit to what I was about to do. And so um, I remember once I got here, I seen my husband and he seen me, and it was something that like I never seen on his face to where he just looked at me and he didn't recognize the person that he knew before. And so once I got to Montana, I really didn't know what it was going to be like. I don't know that I was truly ready to like put the drugs away just because I was scared to be sick all the time. But I did go through it. I took about 3 weeks and went through all of that detox and pain that you have to go through when you no longer have the substance that is your body needs so much because you've just it's what you've done for so many years. Um, and so once I got to Montana, I was able to, well, from Skid Row to a bus to coming out here. Now I'm in a place to where I'm taking care of my husband, his mom, and his sister that's mentally handicapped. And now after 3 weeks of detox, I'm in this position to where I'm having to full on take care of a family, a household, and have all this responsibility that I was super overwhelmed. Didn't know if I could do it, but I knew that I was in a safe place. So I did my best to move on. And within 3 years of being in Montana and taking on all these responsibilities and really trying on my own behalf, I got to a place to where I just couldn't do it anymore. And um, 2013, I was in a place to where I went out, had a drink, and it took that one drink and that one night of partying to feel this familiar feeling that I once had. That was like, okay, I don't have to feel anything, and I can go back to this. And so from that one time, within 6 weeks, I was already back using meth, back living with a drug dealer, and for the first time, really um, in a situation to where I was facing some felony charges. Never had gotten in trouble or anything, uh, and so at that point, I had met some people here in Montana, and there was a guy that invited me to a faith-based recovery meeting. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Super not convinced in all of it. But I knew at that point, like, I like had to stop. I was afraid to like once again tell my son that I had messed up and now, I'm possibly going to prison. Um, and that was the first time that I really felt like, okay, I can't live this way anymore. And so after a couple of weeks, I decided to go. And the first time I went to the meeting, I just wasn't really convinced. I'm just like, there's just no way that anyone can actually be this happy, especially if you like walk in the same shoes as I did. Not really seeing the meeting for what it was, and that everyone there, we shared an experience, and so I kept going back to the meetings, and within like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I was the whole time I was kind of like bartering with the Lord. Like, if you get me out of this, I'll do whatever you want. And it was kind of just something to do to get me out of my situation. Well, I remember going to River of Life. They started a meeting there in East Missoula. And it was like at that moment where I just felt like, all right, I just need to surrender to whatever the process is. And I remember, at that point, just going to a church service, and that first service really being something that spoke to me. And I just remember, like, for the first time, there was some type of hope inside of me. And when the pastor introduced himself to me and he shook my hand, I just remember feeling some type of like a home feeling, like you're home, you're safe. And that was something that I had never felt before in my life. And so I was like, I'm going to chase that. I want to know what that is. And I got really plugged into my church, and definitely had a huge support system that I never had before. And through this process of me like trying to get back in a better place, my husband was actually, we both kind of relapsed in 2013, and he was in the watch program, and I was still taking care of the family at this time. And so a lot of things became to be overwhelming. And I did feel at that point, like, what am I going to do? My life is changing and I have all these responsibilities. Well, in 2015, 2014, I really started, the surrender to where I was and changing and really chasing after this new found recovery journey, with a ton of support, but still had a lot that responsibility that I didn't know how to take care of. And in 2015, my husband, he was in the watch program, and in July, I found, I didn't know he was sick in there, and they allowed him to come home. And so I brought him home. And on July 2nd, 2015, I woke up early in the morning, and I found him on the ground. And I remember feeling super scared and not knowing what to do. But that day he passed away. And again, I had another decision to make in my life, that what was I going to do? Because the one thing that I didn't know how to do is run back to the one thing that I felt most comfortable about, and that was my addiction. Um, thank God that I had the support that I did. And remember looking at my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law and thinking like, I promised that I would take care of them. And so I stood strong and I reached out to my support systems and was there for them because I did promise my husband I would take care of them if anything ever happened. And so took care of them. My mother-in-law ended up passing away 10 months later and um find myself in a position where I'm like homeless again and not knowing what to do. Living in the trailer that was supposed to be left to me, with like no electricity or anything. And my pastor and his wife found out, and so they actually made me come and live with them, or they didn't make me, but they offered, and they were pretty persistent in having me stay with them. And I ended up doing that with some resistance, of course, and continue to just push forward and learn how to have a healthy life, which is still not something that I fully know after 11 years of recovery, but really having that support system, that true family and love of support and wanting to see me get well. Which brings me to, if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. Um, I'm at a point now in my life to where I have an opportunity a year into in my recovery journey, and I was offered to go to a missions trip in Los Angeles, California. Did not know that I would be going back to Skid Row. And once I did go back there, it was definitely something that, changed my life forever. To be able to see the very thing that was like breaking me and in like the darkest part of my life, that I got to see it from a different side of things. And so I just remember thinking like that's something that I want to do. And I really, you know, with prayer and listening to what the Lord had for me, it was clear to what it is that, the dreams and the passions that were put on my heart. And so after that trip, um, it wasn't too long after Hope Rescue Mission. It was Union Gospel Mission in Missoula at the time. And there was an opportunity for a volunteer coordinator position. And the email went out to several pastors here in Missoula and my pastor. And I was super depressed. There was a lot of things going in my life that I just didn't, know what to do. Didn't even feel like worthy of having a position, with not having a high school diploma, being a felon, and just on paper, what would it look like for me to actually be able to be used or have a good position? And so I was recommended for the position in 2016. It took me some time to kind of get to a place to where I did fill out the application and just thought, okay, if it's something that will be, will happen, it'll happen. And so I just remember once I did, have the interview, I remember leaving that interview with so much like um more clarity and peace. And I just felt like, if I don't get this position, then I know who I am today. And I know that there's a plan for my life. And whatever it is, I'm just going to continue to stay on this journey and move forward. And it was a week later when I got the email asking that, if I would like to accept the position, which, if you ever heard of, God Moving Mountains, that was definitely what I felt like, is really not in the physical sense, but really moving some huge mountains in my life to give me an opportunity. And so we can, fast forward several years throughout this, and Hope Rescue Mission is what we are now. You can change the slide. Um, when I first started working, definitely a community of silos. No one was working together, and I was super naive to the fact that like I didn't understand this community and the services, because in my recovery journey, I didn't. I had support systems from my church and other people in my life. But what I did find out when I first started working this position is that um, the silos and the things that really were not accessible for um, people who were actually struggling with homelessness, mental health, addiction, and things like that. And so instead of the volunteer coordinator position, I really took this part of outreach and really wanted to fill gaps and um, really work with other agencies. And so the community outreach part um, was something that I was super passionate about. And being able to develop programs in our community, projects from helping a small set of individuals to organizing large scale community wide. As a director of outreach, I've been able to work with our city, our county, our local governments, nonprofits, and really be able to, support and be a part of the unity in our community. When Teresa Williams was doing the 10-year plan, um, she did invite me to be a part of that team. And so it was something for the first time. And this was 4 years into me working for the mission. So it took some time of like really trying to figure out why everyone worked in silos. I heard no a lot, didn't understand, and I was so thankful that I was naive to what the system and this community looked like, because it just gave me more of a drive to kind of figure it out. But 4 years into that, I was asked to be a part of this team to build our coordinated entry system for Missoula, which was a game changer, that we actually seen what it was like for us to to work together. And very successful. I've been a leader in the community now for 10 years. And so with just a little dream and support, I was able to get to a place to where I am today, um, which is very humbling and um, amazing to know that at one point I was sitting in Skid Row, not understanding where my life would go and not feeling worthy, to now being in a place of utilizing those things that were supposed to take my life and really putting them into reality of what can it, our lived experience matters. It's a huge voice to really put together the programs and the things that need to be out there to be able to serve those that are needing the resources in an impactful way. You can change slides. So our outreach team, and I love this. This is the picture of Mail, and he stayed at he was at the Reserve Street encampment. He's 90 years old. Love him so much. He passed away down there, but he'd outwork all of us. And so with the outreach team, I really had a heart to really go down there, and really it was all just being relational. All of their needs were always taken care of by another, our hot team here in Missoula. But what I did notice is that there was no like relational component to what outreach looked like. Were we really trying to figure out who people are and sitting alongside of them? Because I just remember in my addiction and me being homeless, I just needed someone to listen and someone to care or something to hold on to. So that's it. That's what took shape in being able to do like the street outreach part of it, which has now turned into several programs. And that's being able to partner with our code and compliance team, working on a permit process with RVs and cars. Um, but Mel is something that he captured my heart. And there's days when I look back and when I want to give up, I just remember that face because it's all worth it. If you want to go to the next slide. And so this is one of the things that have come out of that first part of outreach and doing the street outreach and building the relational aspect of meeting with people, loving on them, and building that trust with them to actually, want to walk through the system, because it is a hard system to navigate. And if you don't know the resources or you don't know where to go, you oftentimes get shuffled from one place to another. And so with the knowledge that I had in my lived experience, we were able to build our temporary safe outdoor shelter. It was a response to COVID in 2020, December 2020, and we are here now in 2025. We started off with 3 season tents at a different location and moved to um, canvas wall tents. Today, we sit on a county property that we partner with our county and United Way and our city and several agencies with these pellet shelters or 100 square foot shelters. Um, Definitely a place for people to move forward. It's a high barrier shelter. Uh, and it's really designed to help people move forward. We've seen some amazing success when we first started it with just having somebody just having a safe place to be. Like they can leave their stuff and they can go somewhere and take care of the things that they need. And what we found is it eased them of the survival mode to where they really wanted some forward movement. And so right now we're in a place where it's like 67% success rate for people to come in, those who are struggling with homelessness. falling into homelessness. There's multitude of folks that we deal with aging out of foster care, and it's really shown to be successful to be able to give them what they need as a service-rich environment, working with our communities and our agencies. We have to partner together so these people can see how many people are actually working for them and with them. Um, Towards forward movement, we do have mental health services with 406 recovery on site. So there's lots of amazing things that we've been able to build through this process. And definitely, if anybody wants to learn more about that, you can email me or get a hold of whoever, get a hold of someone to get a hold of me, and I can definitely share some more of those things. You can go to the next site. This is our drop-in center, which is amazing. Being able to work with the state on that first project and really, the TSOS is also a drop-in center model because it's service rich. We had an opportunity to get a second drop-in center, and this is the more traditional one where people can come in. What you do find on a daily basis is on that big table there, playing puzzle or games in the TV area, people like resting, sleeping, building community, also have a ton of um, supports if we want to get them into housing or pay deposits. We deal with a lot of prevention, diversion, and retention, helping people stay in to housing. And so I do love this space that you can drop in and really filling gaps in our community that most agencies they're kind of required through grant process of these requirements they have to meet to utilize the resources. And so we really just wanted to our drop-in center to be able to serve uh, people in a different way or fill gaps. And so the biggest thing is here is really building community. Without community, I don't know how people really move forward. So a community with like peer support specialists that are talking through recovery, doing wellness activities, learning new hobbies. But one thing I have found, even when I was on the streets and myself, is that there's so many people on the streets that are so like creative in so many areas. And so being able to see the the creative side of those folks and then empowering them to actually, like teach a art class or things of that sort, things of those sort to really build relationship. We can go to the next site. And so in the process of all of the things that we've been able to do, we filled out for our path grant. And this is a program, if you haven't heard of it, for those who deal with like serious mental health issues, co-occurring substance disorders. Really a team that is taking care of the ones in our community that are probably the hardest to serve because they're more long game folks that you're working with, trying to get them into housing and the right assistance that they need. Didn't ever think that we would this would ever leave the mental health service that it lived in for so long. And when we applied for it, the work that we have been able to do with the two drop-in centers really showed that we were in a place to, well, they chose us to have this path grant. And it was super exciting because now it's an opportunity for us to actually serve those who were coming into our drop-in center and being able to work with them right there on site. So this is something that I'm super proud of and exciting. And we will be working with our crisis intervention team to help build a time intervention piece that will definitely help folks who are in this area that are most at risk. And so it's super exciting to see um, where I've been able to be today, that recovery is possible, that no matter what you go through, if you're connected to the right resources and the right support team and you just keep moving forward. Definitely for me, I just remember being in this place of like really feeling like I could never amount to anything and several suicide attempts that put me in more of a depressed state that I wasn't even good at that. And so this failure feeling that I constantly live with my whole life, I just really believed that I was gonna not worth it. I had done enough to myself, to my family, and to those around me that I didn't deserve it. I didn't, you know, there was no way out. But being able to look back on all of the things that I experience the hard life that I've had, and to see where I am today, and being able to be an advocate and being a voice for those who don't have a voice. It's extremely humbling, and I am so grateful for the opportunities that I've been given, to be the director of outreach and continue to grow and, creating resources and programs that can actually change what the system can look like. And so not only am I the director of outreach, I also have my consulting LLC called Faith Forward Consulting. So I'm going to try not to cry, but it's definitely amazing to know that there are people out there willing to take a chance on those who have had a horrible past. And with that chance, I really got to see like what my true giftings are and what I'm good at, and the opportunity to be a huge part of not those only in a position to make rules and how things work, but to be a huge voice for them to understand what we really need, um, to help us walk through things. So like I thank you so much for having me today, and I appreciate all the opportunities that I get. I'm sorry if I kind of went off, but it's truly amazing to be on the other side of recovery and being able to be a huge advocate for those who are looking for recovery, those who are not yet there, but also knowing the resources that we need to plug people into the right places has been a definite incredible experience up until now. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, April. Just an amazing story of just how resilient you really are, and just all of the good things that you now are doing in terms of recovery work in the state. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey. Let's see, next slide for questions. Do we have any questions for April? I know as you talk about resources, Sarah may have had a question uh, about where to find resources. So I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much, April, for sharing your story. That was amazing. And you talked about doing those drop-in centers and getting a place for people to have that community and to find the resources that they need that might be otherwise a little bit more difficult to find. Um, One of the questions I had was, where do you feel like we should put resources for to make sure that the people who need them or need to see them, even if it's something they're not going to use right away, um, where they're able to access them? Is there a place you think we need to do that like as a state in Montana? Are there places that those resources could be added so that people are able to see them?
I do like I am super I didn't know what a drop-in center was before I knew what a drop-in center was. And being able to like partner with our, building the coordinated entry system and then learning more about what agencies do, like HRC and Salvation Army, and like what like there's there's like I live in a place to where there's like where we got the most nonprofits per capita, but because of the funding resources, you have to meet requirements. And so thinking about a drop-in center, to be able to have a one place to where we can actually utilize funding in a more in a different way of requirements, that has what's been changed. But it can't start without us first coming together as a community. We need to buy into being unified, working together, seeing what the resources are, because doubling up resources is just not effective. And that's what we found here in Missoula, that if there could be an agency that is doing a drop-in center or other things, um, having that freedom to work with someone, even if they were like just stranded here and trying to get to Mississippi. This is a story. We were able to work with this family instead of making them home, allowing them to be homeless here. We were able to utilize some money to get them gas cards to where they can go to, talk to several other rescue missions on the way, and they were able to go home. And so there's not many agencies that have like HRC. They do a lot of I love them in 211 and those things, but they're housing based, so those types of resources go towards vouchers like ESG and rapid rehousing. And then, Salvation Army, they have winter shelter stuff. So without knowing what the resources are, and somebody just needs to be a champion to find out what those are to really build something. And that's how I was able to build a drop-in center, is seeing all of these gaps. And I think more communities need to see what the gaps are and build around them rather than trying to do the same thing in communities, or doubling up resources to where they're all, being able to keep people in housing and paying rent um, one time a year. It's fantastic. And that's great. It's a great resource. But I think the thing that we really need to look at is, what are the gaps in our community? How can we surround and work around what resources need to be taken care of, and like which ones are, you know, why people are falling into homelessness. And it's not always um, substance abuse and mental health. And, really being able to share that the stigma around that is damaging, because in my experience, and just being in this field for so many years, it's trauma. It's trauma that starts these places to where you start walking down a road because you're either trying to self-medicate, or you're using substance to kind of just feel something other than you do. Um, but our drop-in centers, and throughout the state, drop-in centers are beginning to be more known, more utilized, because it is an area where we can send folks that can have a lot of different recovery resources, prevention resources, availability to keep people in housing. There's a multitude of different things that you can make a drop-in center model be. And so for me, that has been most effective in our community, to be able to partner with our community. But this wouldn't have happened if we did not all buy into and say yes, no matter what race, culture, or who we are, we have one goal, and that's to serve the people that are broken in our community. And brokenness, I think we need to look at it in a different way. Of, it's not just the person you can physically see broken. There's lots of people that are suffering. And so we just need to be open to serving those who come in and are needing that type of help, because a lot of people these days are a paycheck away from being in the very situation that I was, or anyone is, that will take you down a road of destruction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's powerful. And I was thinking, while you were talking about it, I mean, maybe that means we just need more community education on what drop-in centers do, and who can be involved too, so that we can get that word of mouth going. I know that's a powerful tool, especially in rural areas, is that word of mouth kind of spreading the information and making sure that people are aware. So, yeah.
Yeah. And really like in the rural areas, what I do find, because where I'm in Missoula, there's always just like there are some drop-in centers, but the problem is their resources are so limited. But really getting other smaller rural areas to work together. And that way, when you get a call from one area, there is a place like, okay, we don't have to do exactly what Missoula is doing, or, you know, Great Falls or Helena, but in those rural areas, how do you have them come together? So there is a source of like, okay, we're going to bring them there. Um, we'll provide transportation, or like, I just all my mind goes crazy thinking about all these things. But the rural areas really are something that I would, in the future, I would love to see and research on how they can better serve one another, so they're not driving 2, 3, 4 hours to state hospital. How can we really work with hospitals, emergency services, and things of that to not go to that level, but using a drop-in center model to create those things.
Yeah, and it's really powerful for me, I know, to hear how invested you are and how much how much you're caring about all of this. And it's amazing, April. It sounds like you're doing amazing things. Um, and you had mentioned trying to get rid of that stigma. And that's one of the things that I know that we were trying to do here with this project, the Journey of Recovery. So when people hear about your lived experience now that um, you've been in recovery a lot longer, how do people react if they hear about your lived experience?
Um, I mean, I kind of love it. And even the people that I serve, it's this like, you don't understand, you haven't been there. And, because they don't see what I once was,
Hmm.
and there's things that I still struggle with. I still kind of see that person, but other people don't. Um, and so to be able to share, like when we have people come into our drop-in centers, our TSOS and our volunteers, and being able, and that's where I really want to take the next step of my career is being able to share, what has come out of my addiction. And when people hear that I was an addict for 25 years, I was a meth user, and that was my drug of choice, and lived in Skid Row and I was homeless. You do get that initial like shock, like, oh my goodness. But then you share the impact of your recovery and your wellness. And we really, that's part of the stigma that I really would love to share, is that that person on the corner could be the very next voice that's going to change, the systems, or that person on the corner could be the very next person that will build a resource that is needed for a family that had once judged them. That mental health and substance abuse just isn't those who are physically on the streets, that it's happening in households, your neighbor, bigger communities, that we really need to share that, no one's exempt from being in this situation. And really being able to share my story and see the faces and the response that I get from those who I share it with, one by one, it does start to change. We'll always have those naysayers. We'll always have those ones who truly won't understand. But I think as a state and as a community, we really need to um, utilize people with lived experience that have gone through the process. I do like the ones that I call it living experience, and to be able to utilize their actual now story is fantastic. But to be able to sit on this side of it and have this much time in recovery and support, and seeing the impact that we can make, is truly incredible. So it's um, something that I have a heart for and that I really want to put out there. But even I look at myself some days and can't believe it. But other people really start to understand when they can actually see the full picture and understand the story behind what this is, that we got to stop blaming it on substance abuse, alcohol, and drugs. It's mental health. We have a lot of people in our mental health system. We need a lot of work in, and I know that our state is doing that, but we have to stop seeing what it is at face value and start thinking about what, you know, not what's the matter with you, but really looking at people and like what happened. And we have to change it to not what's a matter with you, but what happened. And if you can start focusing on the what happened, that's when healing begins.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, April, for sharing that. Um, I mean, you had me from the beginning. I am also an identical twin, so I mean, and then I was hooked even more. Uh, so
And I'm
yeah.
having twin grandbabies in about 2 weeks, a boy and
Oh
a girl.
wow.
So I'm like, yay.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
congrats.
But that's a part of my recovery journey, is now I get to be a mom. Now I get to be grandma, and the evidence of me pushing forward and accepting recovery and my support systems has given me a life I thought I would never have.
Yeah, just amazing. Maynard, if you want to go to the next slide, before we started, I was talking to April about resources in terms of our website, and this recording and our May webinar will also be found on our anti-stigma resources page. There's a QR code there. So we will get that link out, and we just really appreciate your just not only sharing your story, April, but all the great work at Hope Rescue Mission, and your input on, working within your communities to share resources, and just your passion for recovery and wanting to see people be successful.
Thank you so much for having me. It's definitely a
Yes,
pleasure.
thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.